Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A happy Monday. I changed up the format a little bit, and we decided we're going to do an in real life book club tonight. And if you don't like it, you can go start your own show here on YouTube because StreamYard accounts are free. We've got some in real life guests here. We've got Kevin, Nick, Joe, Dr. Paul, and Michael, and myself, Father Seitz. And we are going to be talking about a book that was published last year by Monsignor Shea, maybe a little bit longer than a year. The Religion of the Day. It's a companion to his book on the end of Christendom and the beginning of apostolic mission. And I actually we've talked about it a little bit on the stream because I found the one particular chapter, the 10 signs of modern progressive, the 12 aspects of modern progressive religion. We've talked about that on this stream before. So we're delighted to have these eminent gentlemen here. We've got a veritable brain trust to talk about the religion of the day. So, Joe, what do you think?
Thanks, Father.
Yes.
I think it probably makes sense to give a quick recap of the first book mentioned, from Christendom to Apostolic Mission, and then just kind of an overview of the religion of the day and then go from there. So instead of putting anybody on the spot, I will give in a sentence or two, this is kind of how I see both of the books, and then I guess jump in if you would add anything.
Mm-hmm.
From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, I would say looked at the time well after Jesus when Christianity was really in vogue. It was the norm. Your kid was baptized, they went to a Catholic school, they were born at a Catholic hospital, then they went to a Catholic university, and they probably worked for a Catholic employer. And at somewhere along that line, they were pretty well supported in the faith. And this maybe isn't fair to say, but it maybe didn't take heroic faith to practice in that setting where it was really common. But the book makes the point of we are not there anymore. Not by a long shot. It's more in apostolic times, in a pagan kind of a culture. There is a different religion of the day that has taken over mainstream society, kind of shifted the focus. So then this book, The Religion of the Day, would point at what can we label the norm right now, or something other than Christianity that has shaped the way a lot of the society goes and culture, narratives, and the norms and things like that. Okay, so with that, what else would you tack on right off the bat?
Well, what makes our age interesting is that it's a post-Christian age. So it's not like there's certain similarities with the times of the apostles in that they're facing a culture that's hostile to the faith, but it's hostile to the faith after having its roots in the faith here. So if you remember the 12 marks of the Christian religion, the first three are compatible with Christian doctrine and frankly come from Christianity. This idea that there's a human tragedy of alienation, that salvation is possible, and we have transformation of our humanity. Those are all bits that are stolen from Christianity. It's just when we get to number 4, the source of our alienation is not within us, it's outside of us. That's where things start to go wrong. We're not looking within for the source of our alienation. We're looking without, and that makes things a little bit funny.
Yeah.
Monsignor Shea himself points it out in the book, in the text.
And something I would add is a lot in the first book. They're mentioning that both of these kind of ages come in waves, where this isn't something new that we're like going back into an apostolic age. There's been times. It's just what our culture is facing might be a little bit different, and he really addresses that here as well, especially when getting into kind of the meat of it. This neo-Gnostic religion, he brings out a bunch of examples through all of history of how the church has had to battle some of these ideas, and so I think that's kind of interesting as well.
On page 15, so he calls the religion of the day to put, and the book itself admits this is really simplifying things, tying it into this, but the title he gives it is Modern Neo-Gnostic Progressive Utopian Revolutionary Religion.
it's honestly, it covers just about everything. Right?
Like 7 adjectives.
It really does. To which he says, for the sake of simplicity, moving on, we will call it progressive religion henceforth. But how can somebody maybe broaden or give what would your definition be of modern neo-Gnostic, progressive, utopian, revolutionary religion?
There's definitely an element of before and after to it, I thought. So people who are believing this now think the past was like we were somehow less enlightened or had less knowledge, which is where Gnostic came from. I did not know
Yeah, no,
the root word there. So it's like, okay, now we know these things and we can be better. And anyone who sticks to the old ways, the Christendom times ways of doing things is wrong side of history, quote unquote. I think you hear that thrown around a lot.
In some of Monsignor Shea's talks on this, he kind of pegs this, that this has been an evolution over 100-300 years, really kind of starting with the Enlightenment, sort of pegs the Enlightenment. What are we enlightened from? From those, archaic, church going people that are still kind of stuck in the Dark Ages, and relying on the life of the mind and that idea that we can progress through our own efforts towards some utopianism.
Mhm. And with the Gnostic bit there is a certain obsession with education that we can see. It's like, well, goodness, if this person was only just educated properly, then they wouldn't have these ridiculous beliefs anymore. And so we just need to make sure that we educate people, and then they're going to be better. And their model of education doesn't really match what the Catholic Church means by education, because we mean like forming the entire person so that they can grow in virtue, so that they can know God, and also, reading, writing, mathematics, history, useful sciences, and that sort of thing. And that's like the primary part of our education, is to form, the morals in the person, and enable them to meet God. But the people who belong to this religion seem to think that just the transfer of knowledge and the right knowledge into people is going to be salvific for them. So, if you only just understood critical theory, and then we would go into the utopia.
Yeah, and off of that point, not to get too off topic, but I think he actually mentions the name in here, Dewey. I forget his first name, but
The library.
John Dewey.
John Dewey?
Educational.
basically not that Dewey, but our entire education system across the U.S. is based after what this guy Dewey put forward, which is not how do you form the whole human person, but like it very much in like a very industrial way. Here's how you do this particular thing, like going after the wrong type of knowledge, like you said.
Yeah, it's very, very like it's sort of like a manufacturing thing. You just get the raw materials, you complete these steps, you'll have this quality of a product at the end, which is not how human beings work. Because I think 4 out of the 6 of us have children here, and that's not how it works, right? No, I have parishioners. I know that's.
I think one in this kind of long title, right? Modern neo-Gnostic, progressive, utopian, revolutionary religion. The word that strikes me kind of as the most odd is utopian, just because I feel even among diehard adherents to this sort of religion, utopianism has kind of fallen out of favor. I mean, I don't know if it's in this book or if it's in the previous book, but he just kind of said the whole experience of the 20th century, really disabused a lot of utopianists of this idea that we could attain anything even resembling a utopia.
Well, we didn't try it hard enough. We gotta
Literally
do more.
It's There's a sucker born every minute, though.
Yeah, but I mean, even among people, who you might categorize in this way, I don't hear a lot of kind of starry-eyed idealism. The other elements are there, but I don't hear a lot of people pining for utopias and
See, I think the pronouns is kind of a utopian move, right? That like people, so like putting your pronouns at the end of your email,
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking
that stuff. It's sort of this idea, like I've got this secret self inside of me.
secret knowledge. Maybe.
Yeah, the secret knowledge about my secret self inside of me, and I can just like show that to the world, and everybody will instantly be able to see basically the concoction I have of my own self image of myself, and then everything's just going to be great because I can just be myself, which is where we get to number 4 on his 12 aspects of the modern religion, that the source of the alienation is not within us. And that's where it starts to go. It's like, no, actually, a lot of times your intuitions about yourself and your passions and your understanding are going to lead you astray. And that's why sometimes you need a little bit of stern medicine from, your father, from the law, from the church to help you get back on the right track. So I do think there's a sense of utopianism right there. If we just educated everybody properly and everybody put their pronouns in their
Sure.
line, then we would just have this utopia of acceptance and enlightenment, which is just
It's maybe a little more subtle than like the pure material prosperity
they don't have nearly the swagger that the Soviets did.
I think there's maybe it's replaced. You're talking about a little bit is this whole oppressor oppressed paradigm for like everything. It's all a matter of power structures, and who's in power and who's under the foot. And if you just got that balance right, and if you just got the bad guys out of the power position, we'd be okay. And I heard that like teaching in public health like all the time. It's all about power differentials, and so it's not. If you pressed people on it, like, do you think we can get to utopia? They'd probably balk at that. But I think that's what the engine is underneath that still.
Well, if you're looking at what alienation from the world is, right? I mean, I think the core of a lot of these, the 12 aspects is that what we're trying to do is remove suffering from our lives. And I think they maybe touch on this at one point. And I mean, I think that's a huge core of the alienation from the world, because to be human and to live in the world, like, suffering exists. And I think the utopian idea of that is like, oh, we should eliminate suffering because then that'll be so much better. But I mean,
We
that's
can do it here
exact-
on Earth, and no, we don't have to wait to heaven.
yeah, but that's the exact opposite of like what it means to be human, and that's like why there's this alienation. In another book that I'm reading right now, he has this paragraph on suffering, basically just around the fact that animals don't suffer. They feel pain, but suffering is a purely human experience. And yeah, if we don't take that on, then we're entering into that alienation. And that's like, I think that's the whole idea of the utopian view of the problem. Yeah.
And I like the distinction they make here about you kind of got at it a little bit, but it's not so much the example is a love for the poor as it is like a prideful
Mm.
hatred of poverty, right? And so when you hear maybe certain people saying like we gotta do something about the homeless, it's less from a place of like we have to help our brothers and sisters who don't have anywhere to live, but more so like as long as I don't have to see them, as long as they're not on my doorstep, then it's fine. So it's more of a how do I get rid of the suffering,
Mhm.
but it's not oriented towards like a love of neighbor.
Mhm. Yeah, as I was reading that section, all I could think of was like a beauty pageant. It's gonna solve world hunger. It's just like, okay, good luck with that.
I wanted to ask a question that came from Joe's summary of the first book. I just wanted to question a premise with my younger brothers here, which, and Father, you were the one that said it, that we're in a post-Christendom age to where there's hostility towards religion. C.S. Lewis talked about that in the 50s or whatever, 1940s, the 50s, where he said we're in more of an age where it's not like, a person pursuing a lover. It's like the divorcee who's jilted and bitter and angry and looks at the churches, don't want any part of you. I actually think we're past that. And I'm curious what others think in that, I was teaching graduate students at NDSU up until last year. And I found, I would work in some concepts on epistemology and I would bring in some Christian examples, sort of working them into my class. And I found that pretty much universally, year after year, my students were completely ignorant of Christian culture, like just ignorant, not hostile, not anything, just agnosis. They didn't know. And I give them one little anecdotal example of that, where in one of my intro courses, it's a way of getting into epistemology. How do we know things? How do we know something is true? And then it's the hierarchy of scientific evidence, to build on that. But just starting with what are truth claims and how do we approach them? And I would put up a slide of it's a pretty obvious picture of Jesus standing before Pontius Pilate. And I had the Latin phrase quid est veritas, what is truth? It's my little intro, like how do we explore truth? I says, anybody know what this is? And like year after year, nobody had any clue. And then I'd say, okay, this is the Latin for what is truth. Now do you know what it is? No clue, no clue. And that kind of shocked me until just a year before last, a woman who grew up in the Middle East knew what it was. And then I would talk about that just a little bit, and the complete ignorance. And I kind of, it wasn't hostility. I just perceived like there's no clue about what your Christian heritage is. And so your focus, you're younger. Did you find that, or do you find hostilities?
No, I definitely see that. I mean, I obviously don't have ignorance towards it, but I read through some of these things and I'm like, why didn't I learn about the Christian connection to this in school?
Yeah.
Like they just completely leave it out. And
Right.
I think someone already brought it up, the idea of the wrong side of history. There is no such thing as sides of history. There is history. And believe it or not, at the core of all of human history is Christianity. And I mean, I'm so surprised as I read through some of these things are just unfamiliar. Some of them I did learn about, but nothing really connects. And I went to public school, if you didn't get the hint by that. None of this is really connected back to how Christianity fits into this, but we have to learn about all these other things. And so I think that's where it comes into we're in an apostolic age. It's no longer is our culture Christian based in terms of business and teaching and schooling. And so if somebody doesn't grow up with the faith or doesn't have somebody that's forming well, even if they it's maybe similar to my growing up of we'd go to mass on Sunday and that was about it.
Yeah.
Culturally Christian, then yeah, I think there's lots of ignorance to what is truth. Yeah.
But the thing is that ignorance doesn't mean that there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Human beings are naturally religious. They naturally search for the highest answer, the highest meaning. Yeah, meaning seekers.
But one of the things,
I was just gonna say, I do think the ground is more ripe for evangelization
That's the
when
point I
there's a
wanted- it's
general
maybe not
ignorance.
at least in the younger generation, maybe not as hostile as we've been used to for the last couple of decades.
Like the Sam Harrises and the Richard Dawkinses
So-
are kind of the outgoing.
Yeah, and I want to bring up a
generation.
point to that. So, to me, it's fascinating. The sort of four horsemen of the apocalypse, atheists, trying to introduce a sort of cold-hearted, materialist naturalism. Like all there is the material universe, and that's it. That hasn't taken place? That hasn't replaced Christendom.
Mhm.
And one of my former colleagues, Dr. Clay Rutledge, he's a social psychologist at NDSU, wrote about people are these meaning seekers, and they're not replacing the loss of orthodoxy that we've been used to for meaning with sort of cold materialist naturalism, there's this spike in the belief in the paranormal and UFOs and in ghosts and astrology, blah blah blah. And what I liken it to is I think the religion of the day is Star Wars. It's the Star Wars theology. The Force is out there. There's kind of a good light side of the Force. There's a dark side of the Force. You kind of want to be on the light side of the Force. But it doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't make any demands of you. I can feel good that there's something out there, but I don't really want to kind of nail it down in any way. If you ask, it's fascinating too when you look at the surveys, Gallup and Pew, on like what do people believe. Even people who say they're one of the nuns, or even people who say agnostic atheists, when you press a little deeper and say, do you believe there's something beyond the natural world? Well, yeah, I think there's probably something. They believe in like a vague, amorphous spirituality.
What was it? Some therapeutic deism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moralistic.
Holistic therapeutic deism.
Yeah. Let's come back to that in just a minute on the topic of the religion and what he would say. This is the religion of the day. And if I'm tracking Monsignor Shea right, he's essentially the people don't know that they're part of any religion.
Mhm.
It's I think of like the Sixth Sense kid. He's like, I can see dead people. They don't know that they're dead.
Yeah, right.
It's
One of my regular contributors, we came up with a phrase together. If you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you, through university, college students, stuff like that, can you think of specific examples of, this person who seems kind of anti-religion? They're a very religious person, but there's not, like, they can't just slap Christian or Buddhist or something like that on it.
Well, you could go back to one of his first examples with the pronouns. It's like, you have to abide by my rules, or you have to call me this, or it's like not that as Christians, like we don't want people just going down the dark hole. But when it goes from like you doing you to like you have to do this because this is how I feel.
Right.
It's like clearly that points to, okay, you do have some set of religion because you have a basis for what you think everyone needs to follow.
Because we're not individuals. Like individuals are a legal category, not like an actual social category. All of you have mothers, all of you have fathers, all of you are born into a community, and so it's like we're hardwired to want to have the consensus of everybody around us about the most important things. And so when there's not that consensus, there may be a war. Like that's just kind of how things go. So that instinct to have everybody together on the same page, it's like you can't deny that. It's going to manifest itself one way or another. That's why the whole, just let people do what they want thing, it works in ice cream shops where like you can go get the pistachio and you can go get the lemon sorbet or whatever. Like that, it works just fine there. But like there are certain important things that we all have to hold together. And that's what our culture's going through, is this crisis of not knowing what we're all holding on to together.
And to your point, segue to that is that striving, for example, in the pronouns, is a desire to like be inclusive and make people to be merciful and to be kind and so on. The branch that we're sitting on with that, what we don't recognize, is from the roots of Christianity. And one of my favorite authors is the historian Tom Holland, not the actor who plays Spider-Man, but he's a British historian. And he was agnostic, really into kind of antiquity, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. And in his deep studies of the Roman Empire, he came to understand that Christianity was this radically cataclysmic event that changed the world, particularly the West, that defies explanation. And by his study of history, he converted to Christianity. And then in one of his more recent books, which is a predecessor to this, I don't know if Monsignor Shea was reading, but his book Dominion talks about how we are breathing the fumes of Christendom and we don't realize it. We are running on that. Take any of the sort of modern tropes, of what we what people kind of champion, feminism, equal rights for women. Most of the world, uh, all of the world, up until really the breaking in of Christianity, did not look at women other than sort of property. There's still a lot of the world that looks at them that way, and that whole idea of there is no slave, free, Greek, Roman, male, female, or whatever. I mean, that came out of our Christian roots, and you saw off that branch, from the vine, and you're not going to like what's left. And we don't realize where, and he goes into Book Dominion on just how deep that is and how extensive that is, and we're swimming in a sea of this and don't realize that that's what we're wet with.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to understand like the depth of the differences between the ancient world and our own. I'm in a book club that's reading the Aeneid right now, and you just notice who gets to be the son of a god, right? Like Aeneas gets to be the son of the goddess Venus, and like there's a few people they get to be, in the image of God, and then there's just a whole mass of people who are just like, yeah, they're not heroes, they're not special, they're slaves, they do what they're told. That's all to it. So the real like the fundamental revolution. I've read that book. Is this idea that no, everybody's created in the image and likeness of God, but
Very radical.
Yeah.
Very,
You can humor me here, flip to page 52, and I'm going to read. So this is at the end of section 2 in the book, and building off of Paul was just saying, are there any of these items here that didn't sort of steal anything from Christian motivation? So the list about halfway down. Yet despite its lacks, there's much about it that moves the human mind and spirit. Consider, here is a religion that 1, issues a high and compelling moral call. 2, promises to overcome the aching sense of not fitting into the world. 3, looks towards a glorious future of increasing perfection. 4, has an adventurous edge and issues a decisive call to action. 5, appeals to the inventive capacity of the human mind to solve problems and to improve existence. 6, absolves the believer of personal guilt. And 7, echoes the truths of Christianity in a way that appeal to our created nature and respond to certain desires given us by God.
he's talking about the religion of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's a pretty clever.
It really is. And like we can get on board with pretty much all of that other than 6 and
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
we would kind of, that's why, most of the great lies of the devil have a big kernel of truth in.
Yeah. The silver lining there.
Right.
and as G.K. Chesterton said, the modern world wasn't full of vices; it was full of Christian virtues that had become unmoored and started running wild all on their own. There, and he talks about orthodoxy as being like a carriage being pulled by a number of different horses that's like constantly teetering on one end to the other, and it needs all the different virtues of Christianity to pull it all together, because otherwise one of those virtues, like you could think of like the Albigensians, they like had asceticism, they could fast themselves to death, and that wasn't good, so they need to stop that, and that's why we have Saint Dominic.
Well, hey, Dominic.
He fasted, but then he also ate. He wasn't in a death cult, which is what the Albigensians were. So yeah.
That image of the carriage drawn by the horses that are all trying to go in different directions. It's not an exact parallel, but C.S. Lewis in his Abolition of Man describes society as a fleet of ships, and it's a counter to this idea of like, why can't I do what I want if I'm not hurting anybody?
Mhm.
Kind of like the you do you. Everybody does what feels right, great. But he's like, if humanity is a fleet of ships, we have to all be going toward a goal. If everybody's kind of steering their ship wherever they want, they're going to be crashing into each other. There's going to be ships drowning. They're not going to arrive at the destination. All these sorts of things. So it's. I think it's an interesting kind of example of individualism. To your point of that we're made for community, and we can't just do whatever we want.
Yeah, and back even more to your point, like thinking about how the devil operates in general, it's like he can't create the perfect idea of like how to destroy man because the devil can't create it all. All he can do is twist what God has created, which is why it's like you have virtue and then just the idea right off of virtue that is like all the ideas we're seeing in this as well, because that's all the devil can do is twist what's been good that God has given us.
So one of my favorite chapters in this book is catching the diseases of the world.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
That kind of.
And so,
but
yeah. No, I actually,
catching the church itself.
Yeah.
And its members catching the diseases of the world.
right. And, so I must have, like, what was it? It was 3 years ago. I went to Summerfest, which is, priests and deacons gather together at U Mary in Bismarck. And, we have fun together. We do all these different things together. And then there's like a little bit of education and formation there. He gave basically that chapter to us as a presentation there, and it was like the first time I'd heard anybody talk about Christianity and that, and I was just like absolutely hooked into it. And then, so he must have been writing it or thinking about it.
Did he use the G sex abuse scandal as the example? Because I heard him give a talk on this too, and that was it's like really struggled with that. But did he do that with you guys or no?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I remember the highlights of the talk, but not the, I think he maybe focused a little bit more on like dissenting clerics from, what should be settled doctrine, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And tying that together, I decided I was just gonna steal that because it's really good.
Yeah.
And I don't, I didn't think he would mind if I just stole it and started repackaging it. And so I've given a couple of retreats now, one of them just this last weekend, because Bishop Folder was supposed to give him a young men's retreat. And, with his mother passing away, he had to go down to Nebraska. He wasn't able to do it. So I had to step in and pinch hit for the bishop there. And that was basically like, I reworked his material to do it, make it my own, and kind of told it through the lens of Joseph's story from the Old Testament. How like everybody kept on sinning, like Joseph's brothers sinned and sold him into slavery. Potiphar's wife sinned and got him into the dungeon and all of that. And then out of that, God actually holds the salvation of not just the Israelite people, but all of the Egyptians as well, because they didn't have to starve to death. Joseph was there to take care of them. And I just got like a sense, we're talking young guys, most of them were college age. Yeah, it's just what it's like living downtown. Most of them are college age. And some of them were a little bit older, but like, it really just resonated with them, this idea that like, yeah, even your personal sins, your failings, as long as you're learning from them, as long as you're repenting, like God's going to use that for good. It seemed like a really encouraging sort of thing. So that's what I think is actually the most important chapter of this book is how can we show people the truth of that, the truth of what Jesus accomplished, that by his suffering, death, and resurrection, he made the world better. And by your suffering, you can make the world better, even if it's a result of your own sin. Because I think that's the antidote. That's why he put it into this
He
book.
talks about it as antibodies, like that the church takes on these diseases, the members of the church takes on these diseases and wrestles with them and struggles with them. And out of that forms antibodies to the disease,
Mhm.
and the antibodies are saints.
Mhm.
And he had lectured on this at a retreat I was at. And I had the good fortune to sit with him over lunch with us. And I'm like, you gotta help me like understand this. And because he gave the example of the deep tragedy of the torture sex abuse scandal. It's like this is one of the abuse of human sexuality and so on is kind of like one of the sins of our day, like the corruption of families, our view of sexuality and entered the church, you know, and but he sees out of that as something coming better. And I was like, this is a good thing. Like, this is a good thing to take. I guess maybe what you would say, it's a good thing that the church wrestles and struggles with and emerges out of what are the, you know, prevailing struggles and sins, you know, of the age. Yeah, I asked him, I said, do you think we're ripe for a new crop of saints? And he goes, yes. Okay. That would be great. Is that kind of what you took from it?
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to my experience on this weekend, and one of the gentlemen who was helping organize this retreat, he came up after my talk and he was like, you know, I was praying about this in the holy hour last night, and hearing your talk, Father, I've decided I'd want to just open up to the guys about this. And he gave a little testimony about his struggle with pornography use, you know, and so maybe that's a little bit of an easier example to look at because it's not quite so obscene.
Yeah.
But you could think about, you know, all of the people within the church who get snared into this addiction, and they have to fight oftentimes for years on end, go to confession over and over again. And you know, they're very often when I, you know, see them in the confessional, they're just distraught that they can't avoid what they know to be a really wrong, evil thing and they want to be rid of. And like what God has to be doing there, it's the only way I can make sense of this, is that he has to build up like a really strong spirit in this person against the addiction. And then we could think about all the hundreds of thousands of people who get caught into it and then come out of it. They come out of it with something stronger than they would have been if they had never gone through that struggle, if they had never actually sinned. And so, looking at it that way, like what are they going to be able to hand on to the next generation when it comes time to have these conversations, when these questions comes up? Because I think there's a lot of people of a certain generation that were just genuinely ignorant about the dangers. And you know, they didn't protect their internet connections. They didn't know that this was going to be such a big problem. And here we are. Now we've got to deal with it. So I looked at that, and that was like, you know, we've got a bunch of early 20s guys in this retreat. I'm not going to say that all of them were in exactly that position, but if it wasn't them, it was one of their buddies in their small groups at NDSU. So, so that's what I was kind of thinking about. At least on like on an individual level when I wrote that talk, and it came out that way as well. So,
I mean, even on the level of the whole church too. I don't know if it was Chesterton or Hilaire Belloc. You know, they sometimes get squished into the Chester Belloc, right? But one of them said, you know, like 99 or 100 times or something, the church has gone to the dogs, and every time the dogs have died. You know, and I mean, there's countless examples. I mean, you know, Arianism, right? You know, the heresy of Arianism, where the church was all
Just
but,
about under.
you know, and Athanasius was exiled, and you know, but the church came out of that with the Athanasian Creed. You know, you know, in the 60s, or when the whole world was kind of watching the church with bated breath, you know, like, oh, all these theologians are saying, you know, contraception is going to be okay for Catholics now, and then you know, here comes Paul VI out of nowhere. He's like, nope. And then you know,
Yeah,
then he
he was
writes,
counseled by
right,
everybody. Like,
and then he
all
writes this beautiful, you know, teaching, and so, you know, I think it is a battle that's fought in the individual soul, and collectively that kind of spiritual struggle makes the church stronger. But also, you know, from the top down, the church has withstood all sorts of, you know, has been on the brink of disaster ostensibly, you know, many times, but always comes through it, you know, stronger.
I've got a question. If anyone felt really challenged or like, oh man, I feel like this chapter, this section is punching me right in the gut, and tying some of these things together and talking about from the top down, from the leadership. He's talking about Jesus as the good shepherd, and says, but he did not urge most of his followers to take upon themselves the same task of rebuking church leadership.
Oh, I highlighted that for sure.
And he's talking about, okay, this is what the Pharisees are doing, don't imitate them. But he didn't just say rebuke them. And I thought to myself of wishing, oh, if only these certain bishops in Germany were different, then the church university would be in a good spot,
It's,
right? Yeah.
it's a matter of having skin in the game,
You know,
right? Are you an entrepreneur who's founded this company and you want it to succeed? Or are you just some consultant that's brought in and is gonna collect their paycheck, based on billable hours right there? And I think a lot of people are frustrated, and I know they're frustrated, and it's not like they don't have anything to be frustrated about. But like until you're in the room where these decisions are being made, like you don't have like the appropriate kind of contact with
Father
people.
Mike Schmitz talks about this and puts it in. We have our sphere of influence and we have our sphere of interest, and
Mhm.
we spend way too much inordinate time in our sphere of interest. News, commenting on this bishop, that bishop, this cardinal, that, and we have no influence. We have little to no influence on the vast majority of that, and we should be spending the vast majority of our time on our what is our real sphere of influence, which is my own virtue and vices, my own family, my own, immediate work environment. And I've thought about that too. Like you can just sort of rage about like politics, church politics, and it's garbage. I mean, it's a waste. We're not in the room. We don't have that skin in the game. We're not given that authority.
But you know what you can do? Is you can
Right.
pray
You
a
can
rosary
pray.
to the Queen of Heaven
Oh,
on her birthday.
which is influence probably.
You go all the way back to like some of the Gnostic ideas that the 12 ideas is like, solving world hunger, or the going completely outside of yourself and putting the responsibility on everybody else and not what you yourself can
Right.
do.
Right.
It's like, it's never about what I can do or I can change. And so it's like when you ask if you ever feel called out, I hope everyone says yes, because we're all sinners. And if you don't turn inward, then all you're doing is being Gnostic like the culture.
Yeah.
But to your point about prayer, that kind of resonates really deeply because I think we all, even as Christians, we have this temptation towards, like the secular kind of hatred of that phrase, thoughts and prayers,
Mhm.
right? Because the allegation is like, yeah, but what are you doing? And I think even as Christians, we fall prey to that idea of like, well, yeah, I'll say a rosary, but like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just realized, I was like, I don't pray enough at all. Like if I prayed a rosary every time I heard somebody who needed a prayer intention, like I'd be doing nothing but praying, and so there is a real sacrifice there that you have to take time, you have to be persistent about it. And it's within our sphere of influence. Like it's within the power of every Christian to, offer prayers for people.
Well, how much have we been influenced too by the fact that we are citizens in the United States, where individuality and like, well, if you don't like something, do something about it, or almost being the change you want to see in the world. That's a Catholic thought for sure, but yeah, at the same time, there's no we don't have authority over
I mean,
church teaching.
something about the founding myth of the era that we're in. It's like World War II and the civil rights movement. Like, I think that's kind of the founding myth of the religion of the day that we're dealing with. And that's all very, very activist, And it's not even like I'm intrinsically opposed to World War II and our involvement in it and, the civil rights movement, but you can't actually run a civilization on that. It's like not big enough and it's not good enough. But I think that's what we're dealing with, right? So it's like, oh yeah, well, obviously we should go out and, be marching and be trying to legislate change because that's what worked in the 1960s. And, I guess it did, but like, that's not what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, maybe question that I'd actually like to open up is how much of this do you think applies to the rest of the world versus just America? Because a lot of like that aspect right there is the Americanism aspect of I have to do. Like it's and you could think of like all these Gnostic ideas like I have to change this and this and this. And of course it's like outside of yourself, but um it's so like this so activist of like or even people's involvement in the church. Like not the person in the room actually making the decision, but I need to do something to change it.
I need to start a blog or a
need
YouTube channel to rebuke Father James Martin.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, really? We don't have any of those yet.
So yeah, I'd like to open up the question of like, how much do you think this applies to the rest of the world? Because I feel like so much of this is like purely around this Americanism.
I know what you're saying, that, you know, that sort of American sort of individualism can do, like, um, is pretty steeped in that, but
We all just got trophies when we were going to school. But you cannot do wrong.
but I think this applies to most of the West. He's remarked on how like could have foreseen like how fast Ireland fell out of Christendom, Belgium, Quebec, you know, Quebec, they're further worse.
Well, how
than
many
us.
of those Christendom cultures are still standing? Like how many of the really strong traditional Christendoms? you know,
Even
in
Poland
terms-
is shaking.
Exactly, you know, so
Is that right?
The bishops there, oh, this is what George Weigel said. So I haven't been to Poland. I don't have skin in the game there, but he said that the bishops had rested on the their laurels too long and had run on the fumes of JP2 for too long without taking care of stuff in there. That's his assessment of things. But he was actually in Poland when he made these
So-
assessments. So
Yeah, you wonder what God is, you know, ultimately doing with it. I mean, you see Christendom fading in the West, all these former strongholds of Catholic Christianity. But you see it coming emerging in Africa and even some parts of Asia. And is that going to be, you know,
and
the
at
new
Newman centers
beacon?
across the United States.
Exactly.
Even in Fargo, North Dakota.
See the church persecuted. And that's so different than
Right.
here.
And that's why I think Monsignor Shea's book on the chapter on on receiving all the diseases of the world is basically just like another introduction to Christ right there. And he's telling the story in a way that we need to hear it these days. Right? In order to because we're not going to devastate modern progressive religion by like really good rational argumentation. And we've got like the best arguments. We've got Trent Horn and we've got the Trent Horn AI. Trent Horn AI, all of
Get
the
it there on
questions.
top.
Council of Trent.
Like I got nothing against Trent Horn. And every once in a while you do need to make these arguments, and that's what he does, and he's the best at it, I guess. But it's gonna be showing the world Christ again, because that's a better story than, you know, the religion of the day has to offer for you. And that's what people find deeply compelling is our Lord.
Which is love.
I think there's a quote from it. There's a quote about one act of sincere love advances Christ's cause more than hours of culture war outrage.
Mhm.
And that hit me like I'm fuming at one day or another, 1 hour or another about cultural war outrage, but am I really trying to focus on a sincere act of love, which on a regular daily basis, which is probably much more efficacious.
That is-
Telling the anger just kind of like it pulls you in, and then you're like, oh, I'm all riled up now about something that I can't do anything
Yeah.
about. But I kind of get addicted almost to that feeling of, oh, I like being mad at what everyone else is doing wrong.
And then-
Never mind what I'm doing wrong.
Like Mother Teresa loved so well and almost like completely changed the world through her little acts
Right.
of love in serving the poor. But her quote even goes even further in saying, like, we're going to spend an extra hour in prayer because we will be able to accomplish so much more through like what Christ can do in us because we give that back.
I don't know who the author is. The Soul of the Apostle, which JP2 had on his nightstand supposedly up until his death, is all about that. Like that, if you're not first and foremost focusing on your interior life and relationship with Christ, all these good works, all these things you're trying to do are going to come to nothing. And you reminded me when you were talking about prayer. This is like 20 years ago. We had fortunate to go on a pilgrimage with Father Michael Hicken in France, and he had spent like a year at a very contemplative Benedictine monastery, and we spent a few days with them. And they were the full meal deal. All the vespers, all the 3 a.m., 6 a.m. All this prayer, and we participated in a bunch of that. And I was kind of came out, and I'm like, what do they do? Like, I'm like, do they teach kids anywhere? Are they working in the hospital or anything? And Father Hicken just kind of looked at me like they're the heart of the church. This is the most important aspect of the church. I was just like, didn't get it, but I see that now more and more. And he was Father Hicken was very patient and kind to me about like what an idiot I was about all this.
I mean, it's just a matter of our participation in the life of God.
Yeah.
And like that's what all the sacraments are about, and that's what all this prayer is about. And if we aren't like starting there, like we're participating in God's life and we're participating in his work, then like what are we doing? We're just working on our own energies, which are utterly minuscule compared to what he's up to. So it's just that docility to the movement of grace is much more effective than anything that we can manage to manufacture on our own.
And you see kind of the, over the past, 5-6 decades, these religious orders that were founded and maybe not centered first and foremost on the life of Christ, but the work that I'm going to do, I'm going to make X, Y, or Z change in the world. They're kind of dying, and the religious orders that are thriving, like the ones in the Diocese of Bismarck, they're attracting all of these young people, and it's because they start with at their center the life of Christ, life of prayer, and then any good works they do kind of flow outward from that. Otherwise, I think that's kind of what the Soul of the Apostle is about. Without Christ as the motivating center of everything you do, you're just trying to sustain yourself on your own energy.
That's what impressed me so much about Focus. My daughter was a Focus missionary for 4 years, and the emphasis on your interior life, and like first and foremost, forming your interior life, and that comes first. And I saw that in my daughter, and I saw what a difference that made, and I just thought, wow, this is that why I think this is why Focus is so wildly successful. They're big on formation of their missionaries, and that your work is an outpouring of that relationship with Christ first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been talked about a number of times of, like as missionaries, we're trying to go out and reach students, but almost like the primary postulate of Focus is to form missionaries themselves into like a deep relationship with Christ. And it's funny reading some of these chapters as well, just in terms of the actual like formation. I can just hear Dr. Jonathan Reyes and Monsignor Shea, like moralistic therapeutic theism, and another one that I love that Monsignor Shea was just talking about the music we listen to, and he's like, I would describe it as erotic self-pity. I just hear them.
Erotic
Like, yeah. I'm like, I feel like I'm just sitting at you, Mary, right now, listening to these guys talk, because like all these ideas are just now put into this book. But it's just, and I would like to get back to the moralistic therapeutic theism, but it's the fantastic on like how it's all centered around you need to have a relationship with Christ if you're going to be able to accomplish anything.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, we can probably some of us here, I'm sure we could throw our parents or grandparents under the bus with the moralistic therapeutic deism. He gives the quote, "It's not unusual for a person to grow up in the church and never be seriously confronted with Christ's call."
I think that was really true of prior ages. Yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, my ancestry is Italian and Irish, and they just went to church and they were Catholic, and that's who you were, and that's what you did, and you didn't really think much about it.
Yeah.
And a real fall or relationship with Christ. I mean, I think obviously sacraments did some, you know, were having their effect or whatever, but I think there's a lot of truth to that.
The sacrament I'm always most curious to know about in any given parish or in any given city is the one confession.
Oh,
What are the confession times like and what are the confession lines like?
yeah, you know,
And that's how you
down
know.
in Arizona and some of the churches say, "Oh, by appointment only." I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it's like,
you just don't even.
meanwhile, here in Fargo, it's like 7 days a week, you can find someplace to go to confession,
For sure.
you know,
Twice a day.
twice a day.
And I think, you know, what you're kind of talking about, that default mode, right?
Yeah.
You know, where you're just like, well, this is just kind of what we do.
I am.
I don't know, I'd be interested for everybody's take, but I kind of see that in some cases that there can be a temptation where the regular life of the sacraments begins to feel mundane. And there's a movement of, okay, yeah, I go to confession and I go to mass and I receive Jesus in the Eucharist, but what else can I do? And for serious Catholics, it can be a different kind of Gnosticism where it's like an inordinate focus on sacramentals or particular devotions, where it's like, yeah, I mean, I receive the sacraments regularly, but the big thing is the brown scapular. Like, you know, if I'm caught anywhere without the brown scapular, you know, then I'm toast, right? You know, or you know, like the First Friday devotion, which is a wonderful devotion, right? I mean, I've done it, but when you kind of treat that as a talisman, like, yep, if I just go 9 Fridays in a row, first Friday of the month,
Gonna
go
get
to
all the-
heaven. Like,
gonna
doesn't
get
matter
all
what
the
I do
promises.
after that,
Yeah.
you know, I think maybe it comes from that sort of like a holdover from that sort of, okay, we're on autopilot, we're receiving the sacraments, but like, what else is there, you know? Yeah, the temptation to not be kind of fully satisfied or dwell fully in a relationship with Christ.
There's such a rich heritage, like in our faith, 2,000 years. It's natural to want to partake in some of these things. And, you know, what, as many of those things have fallen by the wayside over the last 75 years, you know, recapturing some of those things, I think is very appealing. But I agree there's a temptation to, you know, well, like I want more, I want to do it all.
And
almost.
yeah, and my beef isn't with the sacramentals or the devotions. I mean,
No.
when they're properly oriented, they can be, you know, means of grace. But you know, there's just I don't know. I've noticed it more and more that it's like, what else can I do? How much, you know, like okay, great, mass is great, but you know, it's almost like a hipster sort of thing. Like, yeah, but did you hear about this prophecy of like this person that nobody's heard of, and they said X, Y, and Z, and if you don't have the secret knowledge of that
Yeah.
particular
Gotta do the
prophecy,
33-day devotion to Saint Eligius, you know.
I don't have enough money to afford all these indulgences. What else can I do?
so I don't know, I see that as a way that Gnosticism has kind of seeped in among maybe the more devoted of the church, you know, who maybe unwittingly have been kind of taken in by that desire for some secret knowledge or for something beyond.
Yeah, you kind of get to the life of the faithful Catholic. If it's getting to be, I don't know if the word used was mundane or whatever, or one of the things that struck me about St. Michel is like the Christian story, the story of Christ is like anything but boring.
Yeah.
Like if we're sort of bored by it, we're like completely missing the picture here. And he talked about, you know, that trying to understand Christ did is sometimes better understood in the way we think of myth. Not that this was a myth, that didn't really happen, but the way we understand like the sort of archetypes of mythical sort of characters. And so why do we have this fascination with Marvel superhero movies and Harry Potter and, you know, and sort of epic, powerful beings who self-sacrifice and so on. I mean, we got the real deal of that
Yeah.
story. Like all this other stuff is sort of a facsimile of the real deal of that story. God himself, the most supernatural being coming and living and dying for ourselves, sacrifice is nothing but boring. And if we're getting bored, we're like missing completely what's going on.
To your superhero comment, my wife was like in a catechesis classroom at one time, and she overheard this other woman, having a conversation, trying to explain to this boy, Jesus, and he's like, "Oh, so Jesus is like Spider-Man?" And she's like, "Yes, exactly." And my wife is like, "No, Jesus is so much more than
Yeah.
Spider-Man." It's like,
Spider-Man is like Jesus when he's in the hands of a competent author.
There you go.
Like the latest No Way Home made like $1 billion. It's the one that had Andrew Garfield and
At all. Of them.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey
all the
Maguire.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, all the Spider-Man in there. And he gives up his whole life so that the multiverse doesn't fall to pieces. And that's
Self-sacrifice.
that's
Yeah.
Spider-Man being like
Jesus.
Jesus, not the other way around. But maybe to condescend to the understanding of a 6-year-old, maybe we can do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But C.S. Lewis would say that that idea, that heroic theme is sort of hardwired into our psyche, and is probably that sort of proto formation for being ready for Christ, and it echoes through all of our Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Spider-Man and so on.
The Aeneid.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We got the real deal, and Christ. I guess to your point though, like if we see what's happening in the Eucharist,
Yeah.
like we see what's happening in,
I wonder
it's
with the particular thing we're talking about, people getting bored with the participation in the sacraments, if we don't need to have a little return to some fasting,
Yeah.
because like getting hungry, and like even you can see like your Joe Rogan health types are like getting into fasting
Yeah.
now, and interval fasting or whatever it's called, intermittent fasting. It's like, yeah, well, the church is,
yeah, we've been doing that for centuries.
as one of the shepherds of the church, we stink at promoting that. And I'm sorry, and I'm going to try and do better. Because like, it is actually good to fast twice a week and pay tithes on all of your, but like once you understand why you're doing that, so
the Islam kind of borrowed that from Christianity. I mean, so in Ramadan they fast sun up to sundown or whatever. That kind of put us to shame.
which was not the way it was back in the day. Like St. John Damascene was like, look, they only fast 1 month out of the year from sun up to sundown. That's pathetic. Look at all the fasting that we do. And he was right, because if you look at the ancient fasts, it's like, 150 days out of the year, 200 days out of the year, you're doing something. It's not always like a full fast, but it's like, well, no meat this day,
Yeah.
no meat, eggs or dairy this day. And like, I think the Orthodox are going to eat our lunch on this if we don't get straightened out soon.
A number of years ago, I got a big box of books from one of my friends who discerned out of seminary, and I just put them on my bookshelf, and I didn't give. But I saw one the other day. I'm like, I didn't know I had that book, and it just said fasting. And I don't know what drew my attention to it, but I pulled it out, and it was by some Slavic priest. I can't think of the name, but I started reading it, and I was just blown away. And, he's just saying it's like fasting is so essential. It's like in the modern day, and he's writing this in like the 80s, so the modern day is the 80s, but even more so now, he's like, it's this thing that's kind of optional. Really, we're only required to do it 2 days out of the year. He's like, but it is so essential, and scripture is replete with examples of, either how by fasting, like entire cities, averted total disaster, or Jesus himself saying, like there are certain graces that only can come from fasting,
Like, why can't we drive out these demons?
Yeah.
Some things can only.
Prayer fast.
And it just made me feel like such a wimp. Like he's like, ideally you should be doing a bread and water fast twice a week minimum. And I'm like, Am I that weak that I couldn't, I wouldn't die.
Mhm.
None of us would die.
My wife is much holier than me and it's very focused on the scripture verse, like where Jesus says, if any man would come after me, he must first deny himself, his cross. And so that's self-denial. I mean, it starts with simple things like that. If you can't kind of do that
Yeah.
first step in simple things, how are you going to be able to deny yourself, in harder things and so on?
If you can't say no to a cookie,
Right.
how are you going to stand up against persecution?
The final pursuit,
Right.
Yeah.
So go back to the question you had asked. And hopefully this is enough topic, but I'm going to just go off on something I'm a little passionate about right now. Just on the question of like, yeah, maybe throw our parents under the bus a little bit, how they've failed us, maybe in passing on the faith a little bit. Yeah, it's actually interesting because as I got super involved in college and then joined Focus, my mom was like asking me to teach her stuff. She's like, I didn't learn this stuff. And Curtis Martin being a very dynamic speaker, every time I hear him talk, I just want to run through a wall. But
Like the Kool-Aid man.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he was talking just this last summer. He was talking to my team just about the importance of what we're doing and trying to grow. And he kind of brought up this perspective of like, okay, what is like the core of Focus? And I think to the point we made earlier is like actually having a relationship with the Lord, like that has to be the core. And he's like, that's right. But what do we do that no one else does? And he kind of asked that question to us, and honestly, no one really knew the answer. He's like, because there's a lot of people that do divine intimacy well. He's like, there's lots of holy priests and sisters and other Christian organizations. He's like, but the one thing that we do that other people don't is teach teachers to teach. And I mean, that's really, I've heard him probably say that 100 times now. And I think it brought a whole new perspective to me after doing fundraising for a year. Because, I mean, just looking back over on this last year, calling people from across the country who support Focus. And I for the most part, get the chance to ask every single person that I call what I could be praying for them. And 80% of the time it's, can you please pray for my kids? They no longer practice the faith. And it just put me in a completely new perspective of how important it is to teach teachers to teach. Because introducing someone to the person of Jesus can be one of the most important things we do, but it can't stop there. And yeah, I mean, the invitation is to go and make disciples of all nations, but and specifically, yeah, like I've done this as a missionary and I'm realizing how important it is. But 2 Timothy 2:2 is this, Paul writes the letter to Timothy, where he's inviting him to entrust the mission to faithful men who are willing to be to teach others also. And that's what we kind of take the, like, when we're walking with a student, we want to like send them out as well. Like that's kind of the verse we kind of rally around. But this idea that if you're not, like, it has to go beyond the next generation.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I guess I've just been super on fire for that because, I mean, you could just look at the church and I could think of like my parents who just didn't know or didn't really pass on the faith. And hearing all these people who were like, play for my children, but yeah, that importance of how can we continue to not just teach the faith, but help people become leaders. And I think that's also something that Focus has done really well, that has helped really transform me as well. So
Yeah, that formation. And, you were talking about all of the focus on our relationship with the Lord, the soul of the apostle, that kind of stuff. It may please you gentlemen to know that that's what we were taught in seminary as well, as being a particular duty of the priests there. And, that's part of what we're dealing with as a culture in many different ways. It's like the handoff of these things just got disrupted somewhere along the way. You can even look at it in like marriage and family formation. Marriage rates are down across the board. People aren't starting families the way that they did. And it's like, yeah, there was a fumbling of the handoff there. And where do we go? It's like the only way to solve this problem is to go back to the beginning and to find like the solid place where we can start building again, while everything that's shaking just gets blown away because it's not working anymore.
So how far back do we have to go?
To Christ and to the traditional Latin Mass, obviously. But so yeah, it's like we're all going back to Christ and like we're remembering, oh yeah, so that's the funny thing about that Soul of the Apostolate books, right? Like how many times did he bring up marching bands? Because that was like
I'm guessing
more than once, right? Because this book was written in the late 19th century, and like apparently that was the hot thing with Christian organizations. The Salvation Army had the marching band, and that was how they went out and got people's attention. Because they actually went outside in those days, and you would see a marching band, and then you'd be like, "Oh, cool, marching band! We got free entertainment here." And it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with a marching band. Maybe we should go back to that. I don't know. Like we'd certainly get people.
Got the 10-piece band, with a horn section, and everything, and you got to have that sort of, music, wherever, to bring them in. And
What you're saying is we need a ska mass.
No. As director of liturgy, I say no to the ska mass. It is hereby banned in the Diocese of Fargo. So let it be written, so let it be done.
So for the ignorant, what is the ska?
ska is like, it's like reggae.
But
Ska is like reggae with like a full brass section. Yeah.
And it's
Like
a
Real
punk
Big
rock
Fish.
beat.
Yeah.
It's a punk rock beat with a horn section.
I mean, it died far too soon.
As a genre of
Find the Latin Mass and the ska Mass.
I do think, the marching band kind of motif, I think there's a desire to make the faith relevant, right? Like, oh yeah, Jesus died for our sins, but how do we make that relevant
For today's.
For today, exactly, and there is, I guess, something about, I don't want to say tailoring the gospel, right? But like understanding the times you live in and the particular message that the world needs to receive. But I also think, we don't need novelty or like kitsch sort of things, Christ is eternal and he can speak through all times and all ages to all people. And so, and I don't see that so much anymore, but definitely like when I was growing up, we've talked about, it didn't occur in my parish, but either you or another one of our friends, had a clown, somebody dressed up as a clown, like walking around with a bowl that people would put their sins in, like on little pieces of paper, and then there was a general absolution, and somehow the clown was a critical component of that.
It was a retreat, right?
My brother, who's only 1 year older than me, that was his confirmation retreat. They had a clown there that is just,
And so that was somebody's idea of like, this is what'll make the faith relevant to the youth.
Well, that's
Kids love dresses about. So I don't think we do it so overtly now, but I still think there's always that temptation to be like, yeah, how do I liven this up? How do I kind of
Does anybody have teenagers here yet?
probably the closest.
at 12. I'm
12?
only a year away.
Yeah. Well, they're homeschooled. Though, so not that I'm against homeschool, but you got a different set of challenges there. But
Yeah, for sure.
I had did some like guest lecturing at Shanley, and like I get why people are all like, we got to figure out how to make this relevant, because you're just like you're kind of talking to a wall there.
Yeah.
Like it is really hard to do this. I'm not saying the solution's clowns, but like people got to kind of have a little bit of freedom to try stuff to see if
Yeah.
they can like actually get a little bit of life out of them. Like I'm really glad that Father Metzger was ahead of the curve in banning the daggone phones from the school.
Yeah, you
And
can
now
let
that's
the
a North
nation
Dakota.
hear.
Now that's a
That's
North.
nationwide.
Is it? It's going nationwide.
yeah,
Good.
it's taking-
Good. And like ban the phones from the children as well. When I'm Pope, I will declare that no one can have a smartphone until they're 25 years old.
And any who do, let him be anathema.
Let him be anathema. We're gonna give our tribunal something other than marriage cases to do.
cases.
So just
So I have a practical question out of this book. So Monsignor Shea, extols us to boldly go out and proclaim the gospel, like reclaim the charisma and boldly proclaim it to the culture. And the gospel's basic message is we're sinners and we need salvation from sin, and you can't do it on your own. And it's just like, and as he alluded to in there, this is a medicine being offered that everybody desperately needs, but they don't believe they're sick. And you're kind of like, the heck are you trying to shove this medicine? That'd be right. How do we do that? Like, how do you, it reminds me, I have a book on my shelf that I've never read, and I've been meaning to read. It's sat on my shelf for decades. And it's by a noted psychologist, Carl Menninger. There's an institute named after him in Kansas. The Menninger Institute, a famous psychiatrist, not psychologist, psychiatrist. And he wrote a book called Whatever Became of Sin. It was 1973. And he kind of derides the movement in psychology in the 60s and 70s and up to today of like sort of removing, medicalizing our vices and our sins and our ills. Like, it's a social contagion. So it's a problem of society or whatever. And people don't, why do I need a savior? Why do I need a savior? And I'm curious about people's thoughts on that. One thought I had was like, use GPT asked us to kind of invade the culture. I was thinking like, what would a movie look like that kind of tried to show that? And do you remember the song? There was a song came out of the 60s or 70s, and the guy was singing like he's been jilted by some girl who is marching, for all the causes of the day, and like, how can people who say they care about people, do such terrible? I wish I could remember the actual song, but it made me think like, could you do something where you've got the sort of social justice warrior who cares about everything, but their life is just, like all of our lives are, it's just rife with like internal contradictions and sin and problems and disintegrating it, immediate relationships while they care about the big causes.
That might actually be a Hallmark movie already.
Is it? Could be. It could be. I don't know.
To answer your question, I don't think it's anything new. And not to be talking about Focus all night, but what Focus does is that, they put words to a model, but it's the same model that Jesus did. As he walked with the few and loved them, and taught them how to go out and do the same thing. And I think that's why Focus works and why it's been growing so much is it's once again, it's going back to like some of the things we've been talking about. It's not the I need to preach out to the street corner, or I need to go out beyond myself. It's like you have a circle of influence.
Mhm.
First your kids, and then it's like you don't need to go out and change every person who has a big opinion, who's preaching one of these Gnostic ideas. It's like there's going to be a coworker,
A simple act of
a sincere act of love. It's just a matter of, so yeah, like once again, the Focus model is win, build, send. It's just a matter of like you're going to build a friendship with someone, you're going to invite them deeper into a relationship with Christ, and then you're going to send them out.
And I think it goes back to something you said earlier of like the sphere of influence, the sphere of interest, right? And you say like, okay, we're supposed to boldly go out and proclaim the gospel. And I think especially as men, we get this idea of like, like which street corner am I going to preach on, right? Or who am I going to beat over the head with the Bible, right? And I mean, the other extreme is that like you're just like, no, I'm just going to be a good person, and people will notice that, from across the room, and then
Nobody's asking me like,
Right,
why am
right,
I so happy
exactly.
and good and
Yeah.
virtuous? And
but I
waiting
think
for everybody to ask.
there's something in the middle there where like you can do those things, right? But then and maybe this kind of is what Focus does a little bit. I know you pray intentionally for the Lord to show you who it is
Yeah.
that you're meant to walk with, right? And so it's like I think that would be a little scary in a sense of like every morning starting your day with a prayer like, bring me somebody to evangelize. Like I don't know how or in what situation, but like just a personal anecdote. I was at the dining center at NDSU on Friday, and I don't usually go there with anybody, but like one of my coworkers is like, well, I'll go with you, and I'm like, okay. And I'm looking around for like, what can I eat that doesn't have meat in it, right?
Yeah.
And there's this chicken wrap line, and they have like a veggie option. I'm like, all right, here we go. And so I don't have anything against vegetarians, but we sit down, and he kind of says, he's like, oh, you like the veggie wraps, huh? And I'm like,
No,
no. I
really would rather be.
I don't. And he's like, oh, really? It's like, well, I mean, I'm Catholic, and Friday's a penitential day, and so I try not to eat meat on Friday. He goes, oh, and that's where the conversation ended. We didn't get into any sort of deep conversation about faith, but like I think if you do those things and also kind of pray for the Lord to bring you somebody, I think that's the kind of the magic combination, and that's your sphere of influence rather than
Right.
like I'm not a Monsignor Shea. I'm not gonna
Right.
go on a speaking tour or ever ascend to that level of influence.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to do more than just be like, well, just quietly lead a good life, and people are like, oh, look at Therese over there, he picked up that napkin, it's not gonna be me either.
It's funny you bring up that example because as missionaries, we used to go to the NDSU dining centers and find people who were sitting alone or just like on their phone
Sure.
and just like start a conversation. And whether that was I ended up with them in my Bible study or not, majority of the time they're like, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. Like literally like every single time.
Really?
Because people
I'd
are
be-
just lonely.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
they
interesting.
want
I would be
friends.
like, you're gonna think I'm obnoxious or weird or whatever, but that's
I mean,
not your experience.
maybe every once in a while you got somebody who really didn't want to talk and signaled that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you got that sometimes, I'm
Oh, yeah,
sure. And
yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, okay, I've given 3 invitations to this person.
Mhm.
They have not picked up on it. Like at a certain point, you say, have a nice day and walk on, right?
Yeah.
They might
Pick
think
it
you're
up after your
obnoxious, but you know what? Forget about that.
Yeah.
It just talks on this. He said, Christ is sort of moving about the world, looking for the souls that are open to his message. Most are,
Mhm.
right? Most are, but he's moving, and even in his own public ministry, going from town to town. I got to go to the next one. I got to go to the next one. We got, and looking for those that are open, and you don't know who that is, and you don't know if it's going to happen until you try.
It's just sort of like accepting the very low risk that somebody might not like something that you say.
Yeah.
And you just kind of got to accept that risk.
Don't be low risk.
It
That's
is-
right. We freak
it-
out about it.
It's like what's the worst thing that happened? This stranger doesn't like something that
Yeah.
I say.
I'd rather eat alone right now.
Yeah. Like that's an extremely low risk with an extraordinary like payoff if it works. Like you might save a precious, beautiful soul from eternal damnation. Like if you were to like chart a risk chart,
Yeah.
at a corporation, like absolutely we should just spread this out as far as we can and see what hits. That's exactly what the Lord himself says we should do because the sower goes out to sow
Yeah.
and he just kind of throws the seed everywhere.
One of those
Yeah.
seeds kind of.
And some of them land on good ground and the rest of it, like, that's not your problem. Maybe next time we'll catch them.
I know you have a friend that I won't name him, but he basically said that like we have to become way more comfortable with failure, and we basically have to treat it like sales, like a good salesperson. Even a really good salesperson is like 9 out of 10 at least. I'm gonna strike out, like just and we have to be just comfortable with that. Like go to the house. If they welcome you, stay with them. If they don't, shake the dust off your feet. Your blood be upon you.
Yeah. Well,
Don't take it personal. And
so I went. Have you ever gone to the Theology of the Gift conference down in Arizona that you married the son?
no,
Okay, so I want
Theology of what?
the theology of gift. So it's a conference that the University of Mary puts on for basically Catholic fundraisers. Um, and and context for that is important because Monsignor Shea gave the last talk for the conference, and so he's kind of asking this question of like what's the goal of what we're doing? And so everyone, of course, is like we want all of our benefactors to get to heaven, right? Like that would be like what we're trying to achieve. And Monsignor Shea, of course, in a very great fashion, I'm gonna butcher it, but was like, that's not quite it. Or like, what else? Okay, Monsignor Shea, what else could there be? And really, he brought up a couple of scriptures, but I think this has taken my like prayer life has completely taken this on the last like 6 months. Is he basically is like the ultimate thing that we should be trying to achieve is to please God. Like, what is pleasing to God? Okay, we could talk about risk, but it's like it doesn't matter. If asking that person to sit with them pleases God, I should do it. If asking this person to be a part of my mission pleases God, I should do it. If asking this
Yeah.
person for $10,000 pleases God,
It's moving the focus away from like, I
Mhm.
don't want to go to hell. I want to get to heaven too.
Yes,
I love the
exactly.
Lord and I serve the Lord. I want to
Yeah.
make the Lord happy.
So
Please the Lord.
yeah. So what we should be motivated by is pleasing God. And what pleases God most is that we spend eternity with him in heaven. So yes, like
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
we like had part of the question, right?
Right.
It's like such a deeper core of like how we can act and be.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I've noticed that through so many scripture and spiritual readings since, and it's like
It's
Yeah,
those,
it's a-
it's those times about that too. He says it's an okay starting point to want pie in the sky when you die. Like, no, I don't want to go to hell. I want pie in the sky when I die. But he says that's a starting point. Like that
Mhm.
that's not the landing. Like it's falling in love with the Lord and realizing what he's done for us and the relationship he has. I mean, we're an adopted member of his family, and it really needs to move beyond
Mhm.
fear of hell. Want to get to heaven. So I think that's kind of what
Yeah. Say that. And I do want to read another quick part from this because it kind of came up, but this is page 64. In a special case, the rise of dominance of the therapeutic. Talking about, he said, the belief system in 5 core tenets. The first one being a God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. 2, God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. 3, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. 4, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. 5, good people go to heaven when they die.
That's moral therapeutic deism, just to be clear.
Yes.
That's not Catholicism right there.
Well, yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah.
Just to be clear for our listeners who
Yeah,
might not have a
exactly.
book in front of
Yeah.
them.
Which
right
one?
now.
Religion of the day. Okay.
Basically, bringing that into like the conversation we're having is like how much our own like Catholic religion has
Co-opted some of this stuff.
been affected by this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, yeah, I just want to hear kind of your guys' thoughts on this point as well.
Yeah,
I think we all, the topic we were just talking about is like reaching out and putting our own necks out there to like, oh, my relative has fallen away from the church, or my neighbor is, kind of a lukewarm Catholic, or whatever it is, putting ourselves out there. But if we assume that, oh, they're probably good, like most people are going to make it anyways, then there's no
Why
sense of
bother?
there's no sense of urgency on me and to do anything. I don't have to act like they're good either way. So I'm just going to stay in my comfort zone and not risk that rejection.
compare that to the Jesuit and Franciscan missionaries in the 16th and 17th century who were like, if I don't go to the New World,
The souls.
people are going to hell.
Yeah.
And that, like, you can
Motivated.
read it, you can read it right in St. Francis Xavier's writings, right? It's like, I want to go to the University of Paris, and shake people and say, how many souls are falling to hell? Because you're just sitting on your butt doing nothing. And rightly or wrongly, right? Like, we can have all sorts of interesting soteriological discussions about how God could infuse invisible grace inside. But you know, like, that could drive people, like a desire for their salvation. When I look at this this list of 5 things, like, that's, I think, what you come up with if you're just thinking about God,
Mhm.
and based on sort of the, you know, like, reheated leftovers of Billy Graham's prayer crusades. You know, like, he had a
May
big
God
effect.
rest his soul.
Yeah, may God rest his soul. I don't think he was, a horrible human being. But like, that's kind of what our a lot of churches are running on, is like the fumes of Billy Graham at this point. Um,
Well, if the fumes of JP2 couldn't sustain Poland, then
like, no one saint, that's why we always got to go back to the Lord there. I like, that's the sort of thing you come up with, is like, you just got some of these low church Protestant assumptions that you picked up somewhere. You don't even know where you picked them up necessarily if you're a Catholic. And you just think about it, and it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And then you stop thinking about it, and that's what you believe now. Compared to what Pope Benedict called us to, was that encounter with who Christ is. And that's why, I mean, I'm sure we've got our own, each of us here, so got our own, like, yeah, when I was at mass, when I was in adoration, when I heard that sermon, when I was praying the rosary, or whatever it was. I was at a Steubenville conference, however it was like, oh yeah, I just met somebody bigger than me. And I don't know what happened, but like, something moved.
Mhm.
That's how you get past the, the very simple, I thought about this for 2 minutes, and now I have my worldview sorted out. Moral therapeutic deism there. So really, I mean, and that's a grace. We can't make people do that, but that's like what we need to try and foster with the people that we're talking about.
well, that's a tough thing too, right? Like, um, I don't think very many people would say like, well, it's my mission to bring somebody to a knowledge of their own sinfulness. You know what I mean? Like, like everybody's a good
Yeah, you
guy.
can still start with that and focus too. You have to
Everybody's a good
Make
guy.
it-
I don't
make
know,
it
or
something.
something, guy. I
Yeah.
mean, if
It's a problem, right? But you have to take care of it.
I haven't killed anybody.
That's what gets done. Ray Guarendi, he's hilarious, but he had a radio show where he's like, and this woman calls me and she says, my kids aren't practicing the faith and this and that. I say, well, tell me about your kids. Like, well, they're good kids. They're not like selling drugs. He goes, so that's the bar. That's the standard, for what it means to be a good kid. Maybe they need a little higher standard, but I don't. I don't. Which corporal work of mercy is it? Instructing the ignorant or
Admonishing sinners.
admonishing sinners? It's like I think of all of them. I think that would be the hardest. Like, how do you go around admonishing sinners? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you read some of these things from like the Middle Ages. Like, I read these things from the Middle Ages, like, daggone it all, being a priest was so much simpler back then. Right? Because like, they would just
stone and you
say
it down from
load the cannon up with grape shot and let it rip, and then they were a good priest, and everybody's like, oh man, he's a real good priest. He let him, and
Makes you feel completely spiritually inadequate. He's doing a great job.
like, think about, like, we don't want to violate any HIPAA laws here, but like, what percentage of the world is on antidepressants right now? It's like, it's not 5%. I can tell you that. It's a lot higher than that. And so a lot of people are walking around and they just feel anxious and like upset by everything all the time, and they don't know what to do about it. And if you can meet them in the right moment, meet them in the right way, they can like understand that, maybe some of their anxiety is caused by their own bad behavior. And then like, maybe somebody could do something about that. And maybe, and then you just kind of lead them along, and then, yeah, yeah. So just, like, I think that's, like, I've seen people do the street preaching, right? And we kind of look at it, oh, those silly Protestants and their street preaching. We have a much more sophisticated Catholic answer to these sorts. But every once in a while it works. And like somebody whose life is a mess hears the street preacher and just decides, yeah, you know what? This guy looks like he's got it more figured out than I do. I'm going to listen to him. They end up in some low Protestant church. Maybe they stop their drinking or whatever and like start following a good lifestyle, and it works for them. So, just where am I going with this?
Admonish
You
them
wanna,
so
you wanna
they
get
can
them
some of
preaching
them.
fire and brimstone from the pulpit, is that kind of it?
I would come to your church, Father.
Would do it all.
So shout out to
I'll
like
take the grape shot.
RPR and EWTN for being the ones that can get the word out to some of those people.
Yeah.
That's
It's just, you know what? I think we should just imagine that, take the risks of having an awkward conversation with somebody, and if they end up not liking it, just don't push it too hard. And the upsides far outweigh whatever minuscule puny risk
Yeah.
could come to our happiness about ourselves or
I
whatever.
think that the successive focus to your point earlier is, I mean, you don't start from that like recognition of sin and so on, but tapping into what are, I think, perceived. So a lot of people don't perceive themselves as a sinner. I don't know these folks, and I try to be good about it, but most, I mean, it's pervasive. Campuses, society, loneliness, and as Senior said, a sense of alienation, and you're befriending. It's win. You win. You make friendship and you build this friendship. I mean, that's very inviting and very, very much an antidote to those pervasive, diseases, if you will, of our current society, loneliness. In fact, Surgeon General 2 years ago put out a huge report on the epidemic of loneliness, and it's like striking, like all these different studies and parameters of like how much we used to hang out with friends and go out and like be together, or go to another person's house, but it's like just plummeted. It's just like way down. And like that, like yeah.
well, to go deeper on that it's once again the word people are made. Well, one, people are made for relationship.
Sure.
And when you take it out of the Christian context and you're looking at some of these Gnostic ideas again, it's like people are searching for something, yet they're denying the creator. That's what they're doing. And so it's actually, and Monsignor Shea gives a fantastic talk at Seek of like, why are we depressed? Basically, it's like he's like, our young people are actually onto something. That's a natural response to the way our culture is right now. Because it's like because we're made for relationship, and people are searching for something and they're denying the creator, then there literally is nothing left. And so if we can actually return to this, like, I mean, simply put, on like a number of the things we talk about, if we can actually return to relationship with the Lord and introduce people to the person of Jesus, like, that's going to transform so much. Yeah, I know that was another kind of point to this book I'm reading. The name of it's actually From Heights Unto Depths. It's a priest in Colorado who does the Colorado Trail, and he connects his journey doing that with like theology. And he talks about like how our culture has kind of put like nature as like on a pedestal, and you're like,
God.
you're not able to see God through it. Like the theophany of the things that are beautiful, you should be able to see God through. And he's like, there's actually nothing natural about it. Like, we need to stop calling it nature. It's like, we need to call it creation, because that's what it is. And when you deny that, you're denying that relationship, because we should be able to have a relationship through God's creation, because it is this theophany, this image of God himself. But once again, our culture denies that.
Yeah.
You were chuckling about something earlier, like what tickled you there?
Well, if I'm about to say it to the public health guy, it might not go down so well, but I wonder,
Been beat up so much on that, like,
I wonder what happened 5 years ago that made people like more nervous to be around each other, because we all thought we were carrying like the next version of the plague. We haven't gotten like that. I mean, that's
It was like,
embedded in people's psyches now, and that loneliness and isolation
it was an
was a good thing.
yeah, right.
Like
right,
you
yeah,
need
we
to
were-
do this,
we were
or you are,
promoting
yeah,
isolate, be lonely. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
yeah. Save yourself
enough.
save yourself from this disease, but give yourself this.
I always
It's
think
really
of
dangerous.
Alfreda Sauer. Right, I was stationed as a deacon up in Langdon. Alfreda Sauer is probably in her 80s, stands at about 5'1". And the day that we, started having mass again, that was open to the public, she's standing outside the church at St. Alphonsus in Langdon. She's like, you know what? It's just so important that we come to church, and I'm not afraid to die. Yeah. She was exactly the person that the CDC was saying needs to absolutely be shut up indoors and never talk to anybody again.
Yep.
And that's how you have three grandsons that are priests,
Yeah.
Brother,
the Kramer brothers and Father Greg Sauer in the St. Cloud Diocese.
Yeah, once again, the real enemy, the devil, like, what's his tactic? He wants us to be isolated and separated from each other, because
Yep.
that's another way he wins. And I think that's always something good to return back to, because we sometimes can get, especially when we get into these issues, or these politically motivated ideas, and can get all riled up and angry or whatever it might be, is we can look across at the person and be like, that's my enemy, but it's like, no, that's actually our brother and sister. They're a child of God just as much as
Yeah.
I am. And the real enemy is the devil, and he's just trying to twist these things and isolate us and get us to
Yeah.
believe something that's wrong.
That was that in the other one, the from Christendom to Apostolic Age?
I'm not sure.
It was in one of them because I
Mhm.
kind of read them back to back here. But yeah, just thinking of the other people who are struggling or on the other side of an issue, or who think 180 degrees differently. Like, no, like, you need to help them. Like, you don't need to, like, you need to, tear down their idea to make sure it doesn't corrupt everyone else. But like the person, no, like they need to.
Depending on your
Like-
relationship with that. Like if you're in a legislator and they're proposing a really bad law, you got to do all the lobbying tricks to make sure that law doesn't get passed. If they're in a position of trust, like on a school board or a teacher or something like that, you might need to get them out of a position of power. But yeah, the pastoral heart of the church would be to see if we can help this person.
Loving the sinner, perhaps, and
Something like that.
hating the sin, maybe?
Hating the sin.
And to that point, the author is very clear that, he's like, I want to be clear. This is, while I disagree with the means, or the conclusions that are arrived at, the sense of alienation, the injustice in the world, that motivates, members of progressive religion are real. They're noticing real thing, evil in the world,
Sure.
and all sorts of things. And so, maybe that's a place for common ground. It's
Right.
like, hey,
Right.
so and so who thinks we need to put, pronouns in our emails, right? I also am against, exclusion and isolation,
Right.
and
Alienating people, discriminating.
right. Like that's a real profound human tragedy. But I disagree with you where we go from there, and maybe hearing an alternative path of like, here's the Christian remedy for isolation and loneliness and things. And it doesn't end with us kind of calling a whole group of people evil because they don't agree with what I think.
That's exactly what I wrote, because that was the fourth point. And that's the first one that kind of diverts away from, what we could find as common ground. And I said, here is where the mind can divert to an openness to the faith. So he's writing that, they harbor profound hatred for the world as it currently exists and a corresponding anger toward the entrenched but evil order that it believes is the cause of human alienation and injustice. So it's like, I see you, I see what is wrong, and I don't think you're wrong, but perhaps there's a different way. Perhaps there's a church, there's a person, Jesus, who can provide that antidote or that immunity.
As we're nearing the end here, was there anything in the book that you disagreed with?
Senior Shay's the boss.
Yeah, you're on shaky ground if you're gonna go disagree there, but I did struggle with this idea of the church taking on sort of the sins of the current sins of the day, or what does that mean? Like that and out of that comes, I just struggle with that idea, but I'm probably gonna go with what Monsignor Shea has said. He's onto something, I think, and you thought that was one of the most profound sections of the book. And that idea that out of that comes saints is sort of exciting,
One thing that was a little bit challenging was the moniker of progressive religion. It wasn't challenging to me, and I understand how he's using that word, but I think there's a group of people for whom that would just be a complete turnoff. Like they would read that as analogous to progressives the way we understand in our modern political vocabulary, not as progressives of like advocates of unbridled human progress, right? And so because we, conservatives and progressives, I guess we usually call them, liberals is the term that's more commonly used. But I wondered if somebody was reading this from maybe the left side of the political spectrum, if they would take offense at that categorization, that there wasn't enough ire directed also at conservatives,
Well, that's what the first book is for. Like, hey, you dummies, we don't live in Christendom anymore. You gotta
Sure.
adjust your map.
in the first book, I thought it was subtle, but in somewhat veiled language. I think he took some issues with sort of Christian nationalism and
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I remember that too.
you know, politics isn't our savior. Like
I think he said like the Blessed Virgin Mary was conceived without sin. America was not.
Exactly.
Did you have anything there, Kevin?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, other than I can't do all the disciplines and get all the merits. No, it's hard to give up like as the world has become more isolated and divided, and we have less sense of community and other like families and friends that we're able to spend a lot of time with. It almost feels like finding that secret bit of knowledge, like you were talking, Nick, earlier about various sacramentals, or even some of like some of the beliefs that you see kind of twisted in the wrong way to make people who, like, we're all still Catholics here. Like there isn't a secret knowledge within the Catholic sphere that makes you a better Catholic than someone else who's just like going to mass on Sundays and receiving the sacraments. So the secret knowledge bit appeals to me, but it you kind of have to have a little humility. Like, no, I don't really need something more than what the church has laid out for me. It's really that simple, and you just got to do it better.
All right. I think that was a fantastic discussion, gentlemen. And I really enjoyed it. And I sure hope that the people in cyberspace, either listening live or on the recording, will enjoy it too. And Yeah. Joe, thanks for letting me kind of shift your plans a little bit, and hopefully this record here will bear some fruit of holiness of us going out boldly into cyberspace and trying to evangelize there. But otherwise, I think what I'll say is, even though it's dark outside, it's good to have good men here who are striving after the Lord and wish to grow in holiness. So good night and God bless you all.
Father.